Money should not be the mission. The mission should be to create and build the people around you, and money is just an indicator of the health of the organization, the health of your people.
The money follows the mission. You don't get friends by trying to make friends, because you can't make somebody be your friend.
That's right.
You get friends by being a friend to them.
That's right.
And they will be friends you. Well, you don't get money by going after money. You get money by serving, by pursuing the mission,
Yes.
and then the money will follow that.
You grew up on a farm and, milking cows. Like we always talk about doing the cold plunge, and you're like, I ain't doing no cold plunge. I spent enough winters,
I did the cold plunge when I
You
was
did
a kid.
the first 18 years of your life, but I want to make sure I read this so I don't get it wrong, and I know it, but, I think you guys even had tobacco,
Yes.
right? Hogs, you had a small dairy. I mean, that's just,
Yes.
and I think that upbringing for you is probably what really instilled a very strong work ethic, because it kind of, I think when you grow up in that environment, your comfort zone is greatly increased.
Yeah, the persistence is what that builds, because on a dairy farm, you milk cows twice a day, every day, 365 days a year. There are no vacations.
Yeah.
If the electricity is out, you get your hand limbered up real good to milk the cows.
Yeah. Well, and Dad talked about it too, because growing up in East Tennessee, and it's funny because we were at a softball tournament this weekend, quick tangent, and we had a very country group of players and parents. I'm talking about like, hey girl, nice hit. Oh my God, Blue, I can't. And I looked over at Micah and I said, just to make sure you understand, the first 7 years of my life, this is what I grew up in, if that gives you any picture. And they're good people, I said, but they're outspoken, you're gonna know what they're thinking.
That's right.
But Dad grew up, around that. And he always told me, he said, my granddad, if there was an animal or something on that farm that wasn't producing, they'd shoot it. Whatever. There was everybody put in their work, otherwise you didn't eat, or you got in deep trouble. But you've been married to Debbie for, how long?
48 years.
48 years. You created a great legacy with that. You got 3 children. You've got a ton of beautiful grandchildren that I know you love to spend time with, and went to Murray State. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And then really just kind of fast forwarding, you were at HCA for a long time, moved up quickly. Like we talked about, you recognized pretty early on when you got that VP role that the key to really fulfillment in life is not the accolades. They're nice to have, the money and stuff like that. But when you get that first big promotion, I think you told me it lasted about 2 weeks, and you realized, I need to change my purpose outlook to how many people can I help get to their dream in their career.
Right.
And that really flipped that for you. And I think a lot of people never even realize that. And, to get that figured out by the age of 31, it's really incredible, man. And it's just something to aspire to, But you were president of physician services for HCA from, 1998 to 2010. Is that right?
Right.
You had anywhere from 8,000 to 10,000 people underneath you at one time. You worked with Frist. You worked with, well, nobody knows him, but Steve Womack, as we affectionately call Mac.
Right.
And he's now our CFO at AEC, thanks to you in that connection. You were senior vice president for a couple of years. You worked at some very high levels and took that company and helped develop the physician services side of it, which is incredible. And then I don't want to lose this either. I know you won't own this, but Mike Lynn, the former head pastor at Brentwood Baptist, now has 9 campuses throughout Middle Tennessee. Is it 9 or 10? I think it's 9. He told me over breakfast right before he introduced us that if it were not for you, he would have probably been fired, or they would just have the one campus off of, is it Concord or Franklin? Franklin Road. I think it's Franklin Road. Well, right there at the corner of Franklin Road.
It is Concord. The new facility is Concord.
That's right.
The original facility where he started with us was on Franklin.
That's right. And let's see. Let's talk about publications. Good King, Bad King, which is, I talk about now, and I think a lot of it was because that seed was planted through this, that anything that you need to know in business, you don't need to go read business books. You just need to go read the Old Testament and the Bible, and you will discover everything you need to know about how to run a business and how to run your life.
That's
I
right.
think everybody's just looking for the new age thing that sounds cool, but it is all right there, and you just got to really dive into it. Good King, Bad King ended up a little bit, it was a lot, so you came out with kind of a condensed version of that, right?
Right. Good King, Bad King is more like a manual. Really,
That it is,
an
man.
application manual, and then I skinnied it down for general consumption, and something about half that size called 2020
That's right.
Leadership.
Yeah, which I have read that one. But the Good King, Bad King, I go to for ideas, and I use it just like that. Like I'll go into the, what do you call it? The is it the
Table of
index,
contents.
table of contents?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can read,
But
but I go into
I do the same thing. If I don't want to think back through something,
yeah.
I'll go find it and see how I laid it out in there.
I know.
And it keeps me from having to think back through a lot of stuff.
It does, man, and there's a lot of stuff you don't remember details. Our brains are very fickle,
Right.
and I think Satan uses that to his advantage. But now people are, they'll go to Chat GPT. But I love going into the book. There's something about that with your memory when you have to dig in, and just the amount of your senses that you get involved are what help
Right.
create a stronger memory. But, just a real quick excerpt. You and I talked about Moses and his father-in-law Jethro. He helped Moses really develop the first company, the framework for their first
That's right.
company. Do you want to talk about that real quick?
Well, Moses was a great prophet.
Yeah.
God said nobody like him, but he talked to him face to face. And he was a good man. He offered his life to spare the children of Israel, which wasn't required. But he was a great guy. He was a horrible leader. And that's what a lot of Christian business leaders need to know. A lot of people in ministry need to know.
Yes.
Because you've got a good heart doesn't make you a good leader.
That's
He
right.
was a horrible leader.
Yeah.
And Jethro was just wired and gifted with the ability to see things organizationally.
More like an integrator, wasn't
And
it?
he was the integrator. He says, hey, you're trying to do, what you're doing is not good. You're going to wear yourself out in the people too. Pick some people,
Right.
pick some good leaders that you can entrust this with, and pick leaders of thousands, hundreds, 50s, 10s, etc.
According to their abilities. That's
According
right.
to their ability, delegate to them, let them handle everything they can handle. You do the stuff they can't handle. You talk to God and get the principles and the direction and teach the people.
Yeah.
You hear from God, you teach the people, and you handle, management by exception. You handle
Yeah.
only the hard cases that nobody else can handle.
Yep.
And that's good for every leader to know. Only do the things that nobody else can do.
Yes.
But train your team, support your team, empower them to the max.
Yeah. And that story always stood out when you and I talked through that. And, like you said, most business owners take that mentality of they have to handle everything. And the logjam, he had everybody coming to him. And not only was it frustrating the Israelites, it was frustrating him and just wearing him down. And I think if I were to look at, in hindsight, that story, and we'll get to this a little bit more, but that story probably helped you with the framework on why you came out with the personality assessments, because, Jethro told him to create and name people who had according to their abilities, over thousands, hundreds, 50s. The personality profiling, which was kind of the next real phase in evolution for you, helps leaders do that. It helps them identify their value systems and connect with them and see them at a deeper level. And you and I have both, I know you've seen it for years, but I've seen over the past year how true all that stuff holds. It is absolutely incredible. And that's, for you and I, kind of something we'll be implementing in the UM. But, you know, Good King, Bad King is just a great book for just a reference manual, literally. And, you know, but just kind of post endeavors, you know, the president for Vision Leadership Foundation, which is kind of what is a nonprofit that, you know, just to kind of tell you the heart of this guy. You know, he asks people that he works with that to donate to that foundation in lieu of, you know, writing it direct to you. And, you know, that speaks a lot to your heart and your desire just to help and grow people. Again, we talked about Mike Glenn, executive coaching advisor for the Brain Recovery Institute. Just a ton of awesome things that you continue to create a legacy for your life and your kids and grandkids. And, you know, and I find it funny that, you know, now we're working together and I'm a recipient of all that wisdom, and I'm thankful for you, man. You know, very thankful for you. And I know one day you're going to tell me that why you worked with me, it was because you got some type of a very large tax deduction from the government or something. Or something like that, you know what I mean? But man, it's been incredible, and I'm looking forward to just many years to come, dude. You know, especially as we kind of load into the axiology, which we'll talk about today, the DISC assessment, which is kind of the foundational element for most of the profiling that's done. So kind of with that in mind, you know, for those that don't know what a DISC assessment is, can we kind of talk through that really quick?
Sure. The DISC assessment is one of the older, more common assessments out there. Been around about as long as any of them, and it's called DISC because it's an acronym. It stands for, the D stands for driver or dominant, take charge personality. The I stands for influencer, the life of the party. The S stands for steady.
Yeah.
You have the people that just don't get excited when everybody around them thinks they should. And then the C stands for compliant, competent, cautious, etc. And everybody is some combination of those four. You're not one or the other. Some people are more balanced in that mix than others. Some people are more exaggerated. You have like a promoter type person who's a lot of D, a lot of I, and lower. I don't know
any of those.
Besides yourself.
God dang, man.
And then you run a company with engineers who are predominantly S and C types.
And you know, it's interesting because we always talk about opposites attract, and I think the S and the C types, they love the action that comes with DIs, which is why you usually see the men or women with a DI married to an SC, you know, or a CS like Micah. You know, she's one of the most steady individuals ever, you know, or that IC combo like you and I. You're a DC, you know, I'm a DI. We get along great, you know. The only time you and I have ever even kind of gotten into an argument or whatever was because I was texting you too late or something like that. I mean, we get along really well, and that's that, you know, I'm more, I guess, a visionary type. You're an integrator type, and that type of combo is what creates awesome companies. And I think the DISC, though, it's more of a, and correct me on this, but the DISC is more of a way a person sees the world, receives information, right?
Right.
Yeah.
You tend to message people and like to receive communication based on your hardwire.
Yeah.
Like the D likes, well, what's the bottom line?
Right.
What do I do with this? The I wants to know, well, how does this affect people? The S wants to know, they like things, they like the status quo and steady progress, so they want to see how things fit in with what they're doing. And the C tends to see, well, they like facts, figures, details, and
Yeah.
can spot what's wrong.
Yeah, from a very analytical
Yes.
perspective. So with the disc, you have your natural state, which we always talk about. It's kind of like how you were born, your wiring. Like if you walk into a house, it's wired a certain way. Then you have your adapted state, which is how you've kind of rewired yourself within the flexibility of your mind to the environment you're in, right? Can we talk about that?
Yeah,
a
you're
little bit?
adjusting to your environment.
Yeah.
If the environment calls for heavy teamwork, you might be a high D personality that likes to be the Lone Ranger, but you would tend to exhibit more behavior that is more like an IRS of going along to get along.
Yeah.
If the culture requires that.
Yeah. And you and I talked about the one trait of a D, the driver personality, which you and I both share, is the ability, and I want to make sure I get this right, but the higher a D on that scale, the more they're willing to get into the mud, the things that they do not like to do in order to achieve the goal. Like for me, you know, when we started AEC, me doing design work is not my favorite thing. I can do it quite colorfully, because everybody always makes fun of when they look at my old drawings. Like I got colors all over the place because it kept me it kept me engaged. My plans were very colorful. But, you know, and I sustained that for a long time only because I wanted to get the company to where it is today. And, you know, whereas you take a steady person, like Micah, for instance, they're not going to be as willing to dive into the mud to achieve that because they're just so steady.
Right. Well, some people are goal driven,
Yeah.
predominantly goal driven. That would be folks like us with a primary D. We pursue the goal and we play whatever role we have to achieve the goal.
Right.
And there are people that are more role driven. The S personality, so a lot of times the C personality, here's who I am, here's what I do.
Right.
And they want to do what they want to do, and they will tend to accept whatever goals they can achieve by being that way.
Yeah.
And the problem becomes when a role-driven person wants to achieve certain goals that are not achievable through that role. It's like the guy 40 years ago offered a job in internal audit in HCA, and he said, I asked him what he wanted to do. He said, I want to sit in your chair someday. I said, there you go, big boy, because I don't want this job all that much longer anyway.
Right.
And I offered him the job, and he didn't take it. And I asked him why he didn't take it. He said, well, he had a dog. He had a dog, and he couldn't travel and leave the dog.
I know.
I said, well, buddy, God bless your heart for loving your dog that much. Your dog's very lucky. But you're never going to sit in this chair or one like it, because you're going to have to do things that you're not willing to do.
Yeah. You know, I don't want to call that excuse. He was being perfectly honest, but I think in a lot of times when you see that, there's always a reason why to why they don't make that next step. You know, and we talk about Steve. I love Mac. Steve is just a good man. I joke with him all the time. I'm like, Steve, man, if you need me to pick you up, we'll have somebody come and pick you up and bring you into the office, just because he loves to be a part of the action. But he's always said, you know, I am so pissed off I want to be a driver. He's always said that.
I remember the first time he ever took a DISC personality profile.
Yeah.
I think he took it 2 or 3 times because he kept wanting it to come out that he was a D. And I, you know, in a good-hearted way, I just laughed with him. I said, buddy, it's just, you're just not a D.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing.
It is. That's how God made you. And that's what we talk a lot about, man. Let's discover who you are and then go after that purpose for your life.
That's right.
So now, you know, pivoting into axiology, which is another cornerstone to what, you know, we use for our profiling. Talk a little bit about how the axiology came about, you know, and I've met with Wayne, you know, as we kind of build this for UM and undeniable mentality, and, you know, it's more of a values assessment of people. It does a deeper dive into who they are and their fears and concerns, and, you know.
Well, it's based on how you think.
Yeah.
It's a science based on mathematics, created by Dr. Hartman, many years ago.
Who that guy had a pretty incredible background too.
He came up during the Hitler reign in Germany
That's right.
and reasoned that if Hitler could organize evil, that good could be organized.
Yeah.
So when we talk about values, we think of our value system.
Yeah.
But his science was based, what do you value? How do you think about yourself? How do you think about the world?
Pull that thing closer to if you want, so you can sit back.
What matters? And he developed the science, and then Wayne Carpenter spent the last 40 years of his life developing reports and tools and so forth, going
Right.
deeper. So if you took a disc profile on an individual, it would be like an x-ray of their personality.
Right.
If they do an axiology profile, it's like an MRI
Right.
of their personality.
Yeah.
An x-ray would show you have a broken bone. An
Yeah.
MRI would show that you have bone cancer, and that's why your bone broke.
Right. Well, and the incredible thing about that, going back to the axiology, he literally figured out through math how to quantify, these traits and values in people for good. And, it's an interesting test where it's so simple. The amount of information that comes out of it is just incredible. And you're literally ranking best to worst on certain situations. For instance, how do you view a baby? Or how do you view a nuclear war? Or how do you view a corrupt judge?
Right.
And
You have 18 statements. And first you say, is it positive or negative?
right.
And then you rank them from best to worst. So you take like a uniform. Based on your perspective, some people see a uniform as really good. Some people see a uniform as really bad.
Yeah.
So
It's so funny you say that.
So you can't, a DISC and any of the other, what I call behavioral profiles, they're really self-assessments, and you can manipulate them either consciously or subconsciously by not being self-aware.
Right.
With axiology, you think how you think.
Yeah.
And it is literally measuring mathematically your thought processes. So you think, and from what you think, you act.
Yeah.
So that's why it's so accurate and so dependable.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting you say that about the uniform thing, because we were having this conversation, and I hate uniforms. I just don't like them because of it. To me, it seems like corporate, bureaucratic, not real. And I was having this conversation.
It doesn't match with your promoter personality.
It doesn't, because people want real. We talk about what's the number one goal for a salesperson. Sales is a negative connotation, and in some respects it can be. There's been a tarnish on it, but really in sales, the number one thing you're trying to gain is trust.
Right.
And when you're not real, when people don't feel like they can trust you, you're not going to do well at sales.
Right.
So we were talking about with our conferences, we got some conferences coming up for the firm, and everybody was like, well, so-and-so, they do this and that. And I'm like, well, number one, I don't care what anybody else does. So I said, I'll tell you what. Here's what we'll do. We'll buy lapel pins that'll have your logo on them. To me, that seems more natural. If you want to wear a sports coat, if you want to wear a button down, if you want to wear a shirt, you can put a lapel pin on it, and it's flexible, and your shirt's not, you can put it on anything you want, and we don't have to worry about buying you a shirt every year either. So, yeah, uniforms, I'm not saying they're just terrible. I'm just saying I like other
No, but when
options.
you're on that building over there, you're going to want a security guard
That's what I'm talking
with
about.
uniform.
That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But yeah, the axiology is just incredible. So as a person matures in life, their values change. Say you have kids. Let's say you get saved. Holy Spirit starts working in your life and starts to change you as you allow them, right? Because we run the senior profile, we run a standard axiology on people, just kind of on where they are. You get to see, are they struggling with fear? Are they struggling with this or that? It was interesting getting mine. There was a lot of good things. There was also some stuff there, like me running myself into the ground. That's a big concern that we have, right? Mm-hmm. But as people mature in their life and they experience different things, it can be good or bad. That axiology can adjust
It can
accordingly.
change if you're like going through a life transition, say a career change. You will
Right.
see a change on certain of those reports. Your general thought pattern, if you're analytical,
Yeah.
you're always going to be analytical. If you're unstructured,
Yeah.
non-analytical, that's likely always going to be a component of you. But then certain things like dealing with fear, anxiety, self-confidence, and so forth, those can change and will change as your life evolves.
Yeah. Yeah, so I want to touch on this because we talked about this after meeting with Wayne and going through my profile, because my my natural state was 100% D. It was like 92% I. The C, analytical, cognitive, was like 5. It was ridiculous. But when we took the axiology, it showed that I was more analytical on how I see the world.
Well, there's the 100,000-foot view and the 2-inch view.
Mm-hmm.
The C-type personality gets deep into the details.
Right.
Okay, they're driven by details and facts and figures. A D-type personality is structured.
Yeah.
They tend to see the big picture. They like to control the project. So in a systemic, broad, analytical way, you can have a D personality that's very analytical.
Okay.
Okay, like
That makes sense.
CFOs of large companies tend to be a primary D.
Right.
Okay, and I'm thinking of a company now, a huge company. Their last CFO was a D, I, and a C. Okay, but they have entire staffs of primarily S and C type people.
Yeah.
Running the numbers. They were interpreting and applying and
They take it even further.
helping manage the business with the numbers.
So again, we're back to that driver's side, lending you to do things like being more analytical in order to achieve the main goal. Mm-hmm. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes, but somebody like you naturally have some systemic analytical ability.
Right.
You don't like doing engineering drawings.
Yeah.
But you can understand them and you have the ability to do them.
Right.
Because you have that component in your personality. But you would not enjoy doing that all day, every day.
Yeah, and it's incredible to me, all this, because you and I talk about it a lot. In the book that I'm working on right now, I talk to people don't understand themselves anymore, let alone understand the people around them. Not enough. And I think when you don't understand yourself, how you're wired, how you see the world, you can be manipulated by other people, by powers and principalities, which you and I talk about a lot. They are real, and they will manipulate you. But if you know yourself, you can be way more aware about what's going on in the decisions you're making in your life.
If you don't understand yourself, you will be a lot harder on yourself than is warranted.
Yeah.
For example, I'm a DCS. So I have a side of me that says, hurry up, let's get it done. Then I've got the other side that's almost equally as strong that says, well, wait a minute, let's get some more numbers, let's get some figures. Then I got the third piece of me that's the S that said, well, let's just calm down here. So if you have those three dynamics going on in your head, you can pretty easily convince yourself that you're just not right at all.
Yeah.
So it's when you understand yourself, you can utilize your unique combination and your strengths and always move in the direction of your strength. You can understand your weaknesses and accept them and have people around you that help compensate.
Yeah.
But also, if you don't understand yourself, then you don't understand others. And what do you tend to do? You tend to criticize them.
You do.
And that's why, like with marriages, opposites tend to attract.
Yes, they do.
We are attracted to the person totally opposite from us, and then we, by God's grace, we get them, and if we're not careful, we will criticize them,
Right.
the very thing that's the greatest gift from God we have.
Yeah.
But when you understand yourself and understand them, then it can be really great.
Yes, it can. And So to that point, how, if you're talking to parents, they've got young kids, teenagers, high schoolers, whatever, I mean, how important is this information for parents to be able to have access to get to know their kids? And, we say this is like, if your son or daughter is about to go off to college and drop $250,000, $300,000 on an education, don't you want to know what and how they're wired? Because it'll allow you to better choose a career path that's going to allow them to find purpose, find exactly what they're made and built to do, and succeed more. I mean, it gets you off on a much better track in life. I mean, there was somebody you were telling me about here recently, a young lady who was in marketing who had no business being in it.
She had not made it through the front door and shook hands with me till I knew that was a bad career choice
Right.
for this human being.
And it's sad, man.
It was, well, let's back up for a minute. We'll talk about college in a second. Every parent, and just naturally, they love their kids. Most parents,
Right.
They love their kid. They want a good relationship with their kid. But you can really mess up that relationship by not understanding your child and letting your child be who God made them to be.
Right.
The Bible says that the sins of the father are visited on the third and fourth generation.
Right. Back to Moses again, too.
When we don't understand our kids, there's a thing called father wounds.
Yeah.
We can do a lot of damage to our kids by not understanding how God made them, us wanting them to be like us or be like somebody we admire or whatever,
Yes.
versus who they really are.
Yeah.
So we can have them really messed up before it's even time to go to college.
Right.
But when it comes time to go to college, as you said, you're talking $250,000, $300,000 and up
Yep.
to educate them. And I can't tell you, I don't remember, because they're bad memories, the number of kids that got out of college, they're having a hard time finding a job in good markets over the years. And somebody in the HCA leadership that knew me would say, and they knew that I did personality profiles and I coached and developed people. So they would send them to me to talk to them, to help them figure out what to do.
Right.
And just the large percentage of them had gotten the wrong degree in college for how they were hardwired.
Yeah.
So I would try to empathize with them, but then say, well, from where you are, here's the best way to get to a meaningful path for you and for your life.
Yes. Well, and I'll tell you, man, I'll be the first one to admit, you see a trait in your kid and you see yourself in them and automatically like, there it is, and it's a piece of them, but it's not their main thing. And, I'm going to use Andrew for example, because all of our kids are completely different, but he was the one most like me. All right. But he is so different from me too because of Micah. I mean, from those assessments you did on him, he's got a bigger propensity for creativity than I do. And I come up with some pretty creative stuff. And a lot of that's because of Micah. Mm-hmm. Analytically, he's stronger. He sees the world. He's an analytical kid, you know. Mm-hmm. And this was an interesting one. I found this out the other day. So, Zach Lannon, he runs our Vanguard program for Undeniable University. The kids go and work with him. And, we were talking about things, and he was saying, the different athletic abilities of the kids and this and that. And he told me, I said, it's interesting because we thought Andrew was going to be baseball because he was the most like me. He said, dude, and I had concerns. Remember I told you with him I had fear concerns. That's not what it was. Zach and I talked about it. He said, dude, his ability to catch moving objects is not a strong ability for him. And he said, what I mean by that is if an object's moving towards you, and, Zach's one of the premier, I'm going to say just athletic performance coaches in the country. But as an object's moving towards you, like you can see it and track it, and then the amount of pressure and stuff, you just feel it naturally. He said he doesn't have that.
Right.
And see, when we were growing up and I was throwing baseball with him, like he was scared of it. And he said, dude, of course you're going to be scared of it. if you're not good at something and you have a hard time, like if you have bad eyesight, somebody's throwing something, yeah, you're going to be scared of it. And, you know, because it always confused me how he could not do that, but he would volunteer on his own to go breakdance in front of the entire school and the parents with absolutely zero fear. Well, he was good at it. Mm-hmm. And that, to that point, that's a physical, I would say neurological too, but take that from a personality profile perspective. If you're a parent and you think your kid should be something, and that's just not how they're wired, you're going to probably tell them something that's not true and push them into something that they don't love. Now, I thank God we allowed him to get into golf and breakdancing, which are perfect for him because his hand-eye for objects that are still is very good. That's why golf is good for him. So, you know, the parenting side of this is huge, and you can get your kid off on the right foot. And even if they're out of college, to your point, it's never too late. And I'm gonna give you, for instance, should I have gone into engineering? Based on my profile, if I were 17 years old, would you have recommended me going into civil engineering?
No. I would have told you the same thing I told another guy going into civil engineering. I said, if you work really hard, you can get the degree.
Yeah.
You're not going to be the top in your class, so don't expect to be. You'll wind up owning the firm or running the firm for somebody. But if you want to be the best engineer, you want the highest grades in the class, don't go that route.
That's right.
It's not you.
That's right. And thank God I did get through it. You know, still was able to stick it out in athletics and all that stuff. But when I got out of college and I went into the actual engineering, I hated it. I didn't like it. I knew and I had all this anxiety issue because I was trying to be something that I wasn't built to be, right?
Right.
And we found our way, you know, and I ran to Vegas and I did all these things. And man, my parents, they did a great job. They poured into me, but this type of stuff was not available. They didn't know about it, right? But that whole season is what has given me such a passion for helping other people develop this way, because maybe you can save them from just the runaround and stuff that I went through.
Well, you've opened up a couple of really interesting topics here. The first one is, okay, I got an accounting degree. Well, I'm a D personality. But the Bible says man makes his plans and God guides his steps.
Amen, brother.
You had your plan. You were going to be an engineer. I was going to be an accountant. And we wound up, both of us, we used those skills, but we're something different.
Yeah.
We're in leadership roles. So cooperating with God and letting him, he guides our path, and that's great, and I'm grateful for that. But you mentioned another thing, okay, there's the direct damage you can do to your kids or your employees of trying to get them to be something that they're not. There's the indirect, just the disappointment you express by thinking you see something in them that is not who they really are, not what they care about. Maybe they have the ability, they don't have the passion, okay, because it's not really their purpose, even though they have the ability to do it. Well, that disappointment can have a lasting impact on them in all their life. And then you see this a lot. There's a concept called the Peter Principle in organizational life, the tendency in big organizations to promote people to their level of incompetence. You know why that happens? Because you have S personalities, the S&C personalities that do great work. They're steady, they're calm, and they just do what they're asked to do, and they work hard, and they achieve a lot. And they're a great team player, et cetera, et cetera. So because they can do everything, you think they can do anything.
That's right.
And they, at some point, decide they want to run the ship.
Yep.
Well, and they can do so much, but they're really not qualified to run the ship necessarily.
Yep.
Some of them are, but many of them, that's not what they're made for.
Right.
But they work so hard and accomplish so much, they get promotions into roles that don't fit them.
Right.
And then it's not a successful situation either way. And that's why, that is a large reason why the Peter Principle exists.
Right. Yeah, and we talk a lot about purpose, and I think kind of building on top of that, when you see a person get promoted into a role that they shouldn't be in, or you see somebody graduate from college and get into a career that they don't know themselves well enough, they're listening to what everybody's telling them they should be. So they stay in that role, they stay in that life. They end up working a Monday through Friday job from 8 to 4, living for the weekends, and they look for things in their life to fill that void. Lord knows I did it, when I was in Vegas. And I'm going to tell you what, man, I was having a lot of fun. You know me well. Golf. I was going out on the weekends. I was doing all the things the world said that should make me happy and fulfilled. And it's just a bottomless pit, but people never find their way out of that rut. I mean, my life, the way I'm wired, is all about finding purpose, finding some dragon to slay, protecting some people, and that makes me feel good about my life. And I think that there's so many people, because they don't understand themselves, they can never get into that lane that just takes them to fulfill that dream God has for their life.
That's right.
At whatever level that is.
And all purpose, regardless of the hardware, all people are created for a purpose.
Yes.
And they need to discover that purpose.
Yes.
Now, they don't use that word, but I literally hired and worked with hundreds of people over the years.
Yep.
And there were two things as a leader in an organization you always had to answer. Okay, well, how do I matter here?
Yeah.
They would ask it lots of different ways. How do I get ahead? How do I make a difference? How do I become important? How do I make more? It all had to do with, making a difference, which is your purpose.
It is.
And then the second question you always had to ask was the vision question. Where are we going?
Yeah.
Where are we going? Where do I fit in?
That's right.
And as a leader, if you couldn't help people find those two answers, then they might as well bypass your office just as quickly as every other office they walk past to get to you.
Absolutely. And I mean, how many companies are failing at doing that? I think that's such a huge reason on why.
A great number of companies are failing at doing that.
Absolutely. And I think that's such a reason. Well, one, because a lot of the leadership team has got people in it that have been promoted that shouldn't be there.
Well, you got a lot of leaders that don't understand their role.
That's exactly right.
That's why you have the discussion, very engaging discussions sometimes, very foolish discussions at others about servant leadership.
Yes.
Well, okay, leaders were created to serve.
Yep.
Created to lead, but in a service capacity. It's like King David, good king, bad king, you mentioned that. Well, really the basis for that was my understanding of the Old Testament, and it started with King David.
Yeah.
And that King David realized, one day he realized that God had blessed him so that he could be a blessing to all the children of Israel.
Yes.
So as leaders, and a lot of us are driven and competitive and all that, and in our human state, we think it's about us. That,
Yes.
hey, we won and we get all the perks and we get all the privileges. Well, that's not why God put us in a leadership role.
Amen.
God put us in a leadership role to provide direction, to provide order and structure, to empower people to be who he created them to be.
Yes.
And he put us in leadership roles to bless other people.
Yep.
Not just to bless us. No, it's fine to be blessed. It's fine to have the perk and the privilege and to make a lot of money.
Yes. But to that point, we always talk, money should not be the mission. The mission should be to create and build the people around you, and money is just an indicator of the health of the organization, the health of your people.
The money follows the mission.
It does.
If you pursue money first, it's Brian Tracy used to talk about the law of indirect effort. Most people probably never heard of the guy. He was a big consultant speaker when I was a young guy.
Yeah.
But he talked about the law of indirect effort. You don't get friends by trying to make friends, because you can't make somebody be your friend.
That's right.
You get friends by being a friend to them.
That's right.
And they will be friends you. Well, you don't get money by going after money.
That's right.
You get money by serving, by pursuing the mission,
Yes.
and then the money will follow that.
Yes. Amen. And I think that a lot of companies are getting it wrong, and that is why, and we don't do it perfect, but that's why the AEC Alliance, we've grown and people are wanting to come on that and we're getting some pretty freaking big movers and shakers at the company. But a lot of that is because we are giving them a purpose, through the Vanguard program, through the Diligence Rewards program. And so, you and I have talked to, I've been working through this recently, and this is kind of a new one that occurred to me. I mean, our goal is to grow, as Christians, is to grow the kingdom of God, right? Mm-hmm. And God gives us our own kingdom. I use that as kind of a metaphor of, look, you can't grow your kingdom that God blessed you with, and I don't care whether you're a believer or not, it's all God's and he's given it to you. Mm-hmm. But you can't grow it if your castle's on fire, which is why with our company, we try to pour into our people so that they can go home and put the fires out in their castle. And I think a lot of that begins with the physical, the mental, because if you're 100 pounds overweight, I've been there, man. Every time Micah got pregnant, Lord, I got pregnant right there with her. But if you're overweight, your body and your mind aren't going to work correctly. And, and I always use William because he's been the most dramatic change, but he's dropped 30 to 40 pounds over the last year. And he, day by day, is just continuing to feel better. He's experiencing the world better. His mind works better. It's cleaner. It's healthier. He can experience this wonderful life, hard, but wonderful life that God gave him better. And so when you're able to start providing that to people and start talking to them about living a purpose-driven life, hey, man, you're a leader here. You've got people underneath you who count on you. I went off on that banker last Friday because I view this as we have all these people at the company and their families that rely on us, and don't mess with our people. It's my job to protect them. I take ownership of that. If they fail, I failed. If anybody fails, I failed. And when I get up in the morning, I have a purpose that day. It's awesome. Mm-hmm. And when you view it that way, but people always want to be, what do you need that for? No. If you live life knowing that you need to go out and slay a dragon that day and protect people, mm-hmm. and you take on that responsibility, the way that you see the world, mm-hmm. just completely changes, and you're full of energy because people are relying on you.
That's right. Well, you're opening up another interesting gate.
Baby, that's what I'm here for, man. I know you love the action.
Well, it's a good gate because there's leadership and there's management.
Yeah.
Okay, leaders inspire people with their vision.
Yeah.
They guide them with clear priorities. They empower them with a clear set of goals, and they reward them or teach and correct them through accountability and systems and feedback and so forth. And that can get complicated, getting the right person in the right spot and truly empowering them and giving them freedom. Now, the flip side of that is management.
Yeah.
Managers direct and control. Here's the objective. Will you, for this amount of money, help me get this done?
Yeah.
God created us, all of us, to be owners.
Yeah.
There weren't any factories and there weren't any big corporations when God created us. He created us as owners. And in the Old Testament, he made all of his children owners.
He did.
And the whole 7-year cycle mattered, the 50-year cycle, the Jubilee, where people, their fault or nobody's fault, lost their land, and God intended people to be owners. Well, how do you be owners in the corporate world?
Yeah.
Well, you can be an owner by being empowered to do the thing that you're like to do, wired to do, and trained to do, and given a great amount of freedom with appropriate systems and accountability so that you can, and people don't like the word accountability and they sometimes don't like systems, but it's those things. It's like keeping score in a little league ball game. You can't celebrate the win if you didn't keep the score.
Well, let me ask you a question. If you've had kids, what infers love with your kids? Saying, son, go do whatever you want. Or son, if you don't, you're going to be held accountable for it. Accountability takes effort. I don't think people realize And I think there's an evil accountability, and there's a good, healthy, holy.
There's a healthy accountability, which is wants and desires and drives for your best, and I hold you to a higher standard.
Yeah.
To be who God really created you to be.
And that is the definition of love, man.
One of my most quoted scriptures to my son as he grew up is, beat thy son, it will not kill him, but save his soul from hell. Now he needed boundaries, but he needed broad boundaries.
Yeah.
And one of the things about understanding personality profiles that helped me have a much better relationship with him and not inflict as many father wounds on him as I naturally would have otherwise is understanding his need for boundaries, but his need for broad boundaries.
Yep.
With my other two children who were wired very differently,
yep,
they established their own boundaries.
Yes.
They held themselves accountable, and I didn't add any stress to what they put on themselves.
Yeah.
I more often was turning the stress valve the other way, saying that's okay.
Yep.
You've done your best. You're doing your best. I know you're always going to do your best. Don't worry about it.
That's exactly right. And I mean, to that point, with our three kids, same thing. David and Carter, man, they're very
hard on themselves.
They're very hard on themselves, and I recognize that. I barely ever had to whip them, punish them. I could look at them, and it's just. And Carter and I talk a lot about, baby, there's only been one man walk this. There's only been one person walk this earth that's perfect, and that's Jesus. I said, you ain't him. Do your best and let it go. I mean, she was getting upset in middle school if she got a 94 on her math, you know. And Mike has been perfect because Mike is just like, oh my God, Carter, you're not going to be able to go to college and your life's ruined because you got a 94. Because Mike is so laid back on stuff, and they've been the perfect tandem.
Right.
And you know, but Andrew, I mean, you got to give him wide boundaries. He's always going to try to push your buttons.
That's right.
And that's just how he is. He requires a little bit more
clear boundaries. and there were times when, and you see this in work situations, sometimes you need to paint a heavy black line. You do not cross this line.
Yeah.
And I've had to look grown men and women in the eye and say, I like you, I love you a lot. It would really bother me if we couldn't work together.
Yeah.
But now here's a line. If you cross that, you left me. I didn't leave you.
Yes.
But we'll stay in touch with the Christmas card.
Yep.
Day to day.
Yep. And so this brings us into a good point. This is something I've been working on a lot. And the more I'm thinking through it, it becomes clearer and clearer. You know, you have self-confidence, self-belief, self-esteem. I think where the world is today, we have a lot of people with self-confidence and self-belief. And self-confidence comes from your confidence in a skill set. There's a lot of people out there that are trained in a specific skill set, whether it's a college degree or, you know, they went and got some, you know,
engineers
whatever.
do good drawings.
Right. They also have self-belief because they achieved that. So therefore they think, well, you know, I can't do that now, but I can do that in the future if I grow and learn. What has been left behind is self-esteem. And it all comes down to accountability, right? Because I think people take for granted the ability to execute on the things you tell yourself you're going to do. You know, self-esteem is the tricky one. That's the one that I think everybody's overlooking right now, because self-esteem is, you know, if you first met with me and we became good friends, and every time I said, you know, Leon, I'm going to start the Vanguard program, or we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and I didn't do it, would you hold me in high esteem? No. I mean,
No.
So let's say that, you know, we are good friends, but that friend is yourself. When you tell yourself that you're going to make the bed in the morning, or you're going to take out the trash, or you're going to do the dishes for your parents, or whatever, you're going to drop 20 pounds and you don't execute on it, you're not going to hold yourself in high esteem. And that self-esteem, that self-awareness that you build, I think you can be born with a little bit higher of self-esteem. We've talked about that from a spiritual perspective. But if you want to grow self-esteem, and I think a lot of parents think of, what do I need to make the bed for? And Micah and I have had this conversation. She'll do that stuff for the kids. I'm like, you can't do that. You need to, I know it takes more energy, but you need to teach them to execute on these small things because it'll internally build self-esteem in themselves. And I think that's been one of the biggest pivots for me over the last decade and a half. I had self-confidence and self-belief from BMI, from sports. I had self-confidence, self-belief from Jericho, but I didn't have self-esteem until I really started executing on these little things. And once I had that, it didn't bother me when somebody told me this or that or tried to tear me down, because I had this internal resolve inside of myself to say, you know what? I don't care. I'm doing the little things that I know you're not doing. And so I may be right, I may be wrong, but I don't care anymore.
Well, and you're talking about a three-pronged issue there.
Yes.
There's the practical. What you're talking about is if you make your commitments, make your goals, and consistently pursue them. By the way, the definition of success is the successive realization of worthwhile goal or dream.
Yeah.
So as you tell yourself what you want to do, what you want to accomplish, and you are consistent in that builds the self-esteem.
Yeah.
There's a spiritual side of that.
Yep.
We do have an enemy who's unseen, who even if we are performing well and doing well, et cetera, can tell us, well, you're really not that good.
That's right.
Bring up stuff from 10 years ago, 20 years ago, the one or two times you failed at a particular thing, and always be reminding you of that. So the self-esteem, that comes under a spiritual attack. And then the third piece of that really is the purpose.
Yeah.
When you are purpose-driven, you're going to be more persistent at doing the things to pursue your purpose. You're going to be more goal-driven. You're going to be more consistent. And you're not going to worry about what you're not. See, a lot of people with bad self-esteem and low confidence, they're trying to be something and somebody that they're not. They don't really understand their purpose.
Yes.
And when you understand your purpose, I've had people tell me, well, you ought to do this, you ought to do that. I spent most of my life doing stuff people said I either couldn't do, shouldn't do, or didn't need to be done.
Yeah. Oh, dude, we talk about it all the time. Yeah. When Micah and I went into all this, we were working out of our dining room. And the stuff that was going on, we've talked about that at length. If it wasn't a purpose-driven agenda, if the self-esteem, like I had gone back and rebuilt myself spiritually, physically, I was in good condition. My mind was as clear as it could possibly be, and I was full of purpose and self-esteem because, and come thick or thin, hell or high water, man, we stuck to it. We did the hard things. I would get up at 1 a.m. if I had to, because my purpose was not just that business, but it was my family, and that's all I was dedicated to. It wasn't going out and playing in a golf match on Friday. I love golf. Mm-hmm. But this type of stuff is exciting, and it's what you and I and a few other people are starting to pull together for Undeniable Mentality. Offering these profiles and packages to young families that we're going to kind of evolve into coaching. That then I do see a partnership with Undeniable University in the future where we'll be, with our nonprofit, and we'll be able to offer this to young men and women in high school, college, professionals. Even I think we're working on some stuff that goes even a little bit younger than that to help parents identify their kids and help to raise them. Your kid, I know you love them, and it's the closest thing that you'll ever come to how God loves for us, to love that child. But in most cases, you don't truly understand them. But how cool would it be to be able to identify their gifts and be like, Freddie here, man, he sucks at baseball. But based on this, he could be an awesome pianist. Mm-hmm. Or, they have a ability here that we see where they could be a linguist, Think of the impact that you could have if you could take that child early and start them on this path, man. It's incredible because the world's worshiping sports right now, and God knows I love sports because it's just, to me, it's the most controlled environment you can get somebody into to face down perseverance and have to overcome it without it wrecking their lives. That's the biggest thing with sports. It teaches them to work hard, team building, the whole 9 yards. But let me ask you this. So, what's one of the hardest challenges that you faced down, throughout your career, besides working with us, with me in particular? What's been the hardest thing for you that you had to overcome, whether it was a personality thing or whatever?
Thinking it was all up to me.
Yeah.
Okay.
You still struggle with it?
I think people in general do, particularly driven
Yeah.
people. You're a high D personality, and a lot of your life has been about performance, been about accomplishment.
Yeah.
And it's only through the benefit of hindsight that you look back
Yeah.
and say you weren't the one do you have to show up? Do you work hard and so forth? Yes, but there's a difference between striving and working hard.
Yeah.
The word says, whatever you hand fast to do it with your might. If you don't work, you don't eat.
Yeah.
So we are commanded to work.
Right.
But work was and is a gift.
Yeah, it is.
God works.
He does.
God rests.
He does.
And commanded us to rest. So working and doing what it is God gifted me to do, but then just resting, just relaxing, and it's not all going to turn out the way that I think it should. It's not all going to turn out the way I want it to, but did I show up, do what I was supposed to do that day, and then leave it in God's hand? I was talking to a friend of ours about the peace and joy and contentment.
Yeah.
And he's done well as an engineer. He's got a lot of money, a lot more money than most engineers have.
Right.
And I said, but my friend, here's the issue. You think when you have twice that much money that you can retire and then life will be great.
Yeah.
When you have twice that much, 3 times that much, 4 times that much, you're still going to be on edge because you don't have peace, joy, and contentment.
Right.
And that doesn't come with money.
Right. I agree.
So, and what gives you peace? Knowing you're not in control. What gives you joy? Doing what you're supposed to do because you're supposed to do it. Sometimes it's not doing stuff you desperately want to do because it would feel good.
Yeah.
And then contentment. Trusting God with the result and being content with what He provides and the way He provides it after you know you've done your best. These are not mutually exclusive. It's not a passive, be lazy, depend on God. It's do what God created you to do, work hard at it, but then leave the result in His hand.
Amen. I agree with you. And, you and I talk about it all the time. Do your best. Do your best not only to work hard at something like we did with the house, and our decision on remodeling it versus not. And then He shows up when you're doing the things that and I think deep down a lot of us know. We do. We know when we're outside of our integrity, we're outside of His plan. Yeah. But when we're inside of it, if we continue to work hard and get it, we just lay it at His feet, and it works out just like with the house, man. And there's so many things in our life, just like with the company. We continue to work and work and work and build gravity and momentum, which we could go into a whole thing on that.
You love baseball, right?
I do.
You love you've always loved baseball.
I do.
Did your daddy or mama ever have to tell you to try hard?
No, they did not.
No, because you loved it.
You
threw your might into it because you loved it.
Yeah.
There's an old saying, do what you love what you do, and you'll never work a day in your life. When you're doing what God created you to do, and work is a inner desire to take outward, Nicholas Leon said, the inner desire to take outward action to achieve a higher purpose. That's the meaning of work. I got close to how Nicholas defines it.
I got you.
But when we're doing what we're created to do, we naturally work hard at it.
We do.
We give it our best. And one reason God told us to rest, commanded us to rest, is because when we're working at what we love to do, people are going to work too much, either out of fear, I'm not going to have enough, or, hey, I just love doing this so much, I want to do it 7 days a week, not 6 days a week.
Yeah, and that's something you and I talk about a lot too.
And God intended for us to work hard, live on our purpose, do what he created us to do, but to rest and remember him.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree with you, man. But the one thing I do want to point out too, if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life. And you pointed on this earlier. That doesn't mean it's easy.
No, it's very hard.
The fulfillment really comes from when it's like God told Joshua, be strong and courageous. And the Bible talks about fear a lot. The fulfillment a lot of times comes when you have that fear. You decide you're going to be strong and courageous. You go forward anyways. And you push through it because you love it, and you do love it, and maybe you don't love it at that time. Mm-hmm. But that other side of it, if you push through it and then you get there, you're just and that builds even more momentum to want to go do more.
There's a difference between joy and happiness.
Amen. Thank you.
Happiness feels good. It's what makes you feel good now.
Yeah.
Joy is what gives you an inner feel good and an inner peace. And the Apostle Paul says, count it all joy when you suffer trials of many kinds.
Amen.
So it's the difficult times, the hard times, sometimes the punishing times almost of what's going on around us, that when we persevere, we have joy.
Yeah.
Not happy.
Well, happiness is fleeting. You know what I love about you is you always pick it up, man. And you're like, boom, and you grabbed it. That's exactly right. Happiness is fleeting.
Yes.
Joy lasts. You can have it whether you're in a prison like Paul, or whether you're out doing what God designed you to do, which Paul was designed to be in that, to write a lot of the scriptures that he wrote. But joy can be had anywhere.
Joy is a choice.
Amen, brother. Amen.
Happiness is circumstantial, and joy is a choice, but it's a spiritual choice.
Yeah. That's why when people talk about, I just want you to be happy, I don't like that. And I think it's just a misunderstanding of the difference. I think they mean joy, but they're saying happy. And so, all right, so staple question. So you talked a lot about, one of the biggest things in your life, hardest challenges to take on was realizing that it's not all on you. So what is maybe the pivotal moment of mental awareness, that redefined your approach to life? And we may have touched on it already, but that can be spiritually, mentally, physically, personally, or professionally. I think we all have aha moments that move us into a different season of life. What's one that really stands out to you?
Well, there was a season in the company when it didn't matter what I did, just God's favor was on me, and I got credit for anything good, and anything bad stuck to somebody else. And then a different season came along. The federal government came in and investigated the company, and
that was when
there was stuff in the headlines.
Yeah.
That just wasn't close to accurate, and it's tough when you see your name in national headlines in an unwholesome light, and the big company, a lot of people, and there's talk, there's gossip, there's rumors. A big turning point for me was when, and I was reading, and God's always given me books or somebody to speak into my life at a critical time, and I know that came from Him. So I was reading a book about my character study on Moses. And it was a book about Moses and the wilderness experience. And it described what I was going through. And what God told me, one of the many things He told me in that study was, let me take care of your reputation. Let me take care of your reputation, because everything in me wanted to defend, protect, explain. And we we were locked out communications-wise. We couldn't, as executives at HCA, we couldn't talk about
Yeah.
our side of the equation.
Right.
Because we had government gag orders on us. And I particularly did in the role I had. So couldn't speak for myself, defend myself, explain. And by the time enough years passed that I could, it didn't matter to anybody.
Yeah.
But I had to turn it over to God and say, God, you take care of my reputation. And he did.
Yeah.
And he did.
Yeah.
I really didn't like how I got from my other jobs to being president of physician services.
Yeah.
But I didn't like the road, but I really loved where it took me.
Right. Yeah, and I agree with you. And I think that's an area that I've often struggled with, especially as we continue to grow things. And, we're out doing this stuff more, and stuff maybe taken out of context or people see you doing stuff. The one thing that I found interesting, this was a realization to me on that subject, was how fickle and quickly people forget. You look at COVID, 5 years ago, everything that was going on. It's as if a lot of people have already forgot what happened during that time.
Right.
Or, anything that happens on the national media. I mean, the national media, they print stuff, inaccurate stuff all the time, but how quickly do people move on and forget about it? So I'm sitting here thinking, well, even when that happens, if you just persevere and stick to your integrity,
right.
People forget.
That's right. And people, you said it, people are fickle. In organizational life, if you work hard and you're qualified and you're doing a reasonably good job, you're going to have your share of accolades.
Yeah.
And sometimes people will give you, when things are going well, people will give you credit in leadership role, whether you deserved all that credit or not. And then when things aren't going as well, you're going to get blamed for things you had nothing to do with.
Yeah.
Okay, so
it's like a quarterback.
I tell people, and it's okay to be able to receive and graciously accept a compliment, but I tell people, don't get wrapped up in that, because if you start believing your good headlines, then the enemy of your soul is going to tell you got to believe the bad headlines.
Yep.
And neither one are exactly right.
That's exactly right, man.
You play for an audience of one. God, did I do what you pleased you today?
And see, that's a verbal trap that I fall into. You go into, that's a trap I fall into, is verbal affirmation. That's like my main love language. And I think a lot of that was just from growing up. Well, I appreciate that, brother. I'll give you 30 minutes to stop saying that. I mean, that's my whole thing. But I had to realize that you can't, while it is nice to have those things, and it can give you some insight onto how you're doing, there are a lot of people that'll tell you that, and they don't mean a word of it. You could be on your way down, and they're telling you that, rooting for you to fail.
That's right.
And I think there's a lot of people that are trying to do that just to help inspire you or to encourage you, but you can't use it as an indicator. It's maybe one small indicator with a lot of that you need to look at a lot of other things.
Right. And here's where the spiritual comes in. The word says, "Fear of man will prove to be a snare." So
Amen.
If we're a people pleaser,
that's
a snare, because people can manipulate us.
Yep.
Fear of God. Okay, honoring God, ascribing power and authority to Him is what
Amen.
Fear means.
Yeah.
Fearing God is the beginning of wisdom.
Amen, baby.
So when we quit worrying about the fickle opinions of other people, and we're trying to please God, life gets a lot simpler. So let's go back to peace and joy and contentment.
Yeah.
You can never have peace, joy, and contentment playing in front of a fickle crowd and worrying about their judgment and assessment of you.
Yep.
You can have peace, joy, and contentment when you're living to honor God, and when He speaks to you and you didn't do as good as you should, or you did something you shouldn't, repent of that and commit to do something different.
Yep.
You can maintain your peace, your joy, and your contentment.
You sure can, man. I know you got a hard stop coming up, but I'm thankful for you, brother.
Well,
and thanks for the time.
We can go another round or two if you want to.
Sure. All right. So talking about, peace and contentment and, fear of the Lord. I mean, you know, I was talking about this with the kids the other day, and we were kind of going through, you know, what does fear of the Lord look like? You know, you touched on that a little bit, because I think a lot of people see that statement and they're like, well, fear's not a good thing. What do you want to fear? Well, we're talking about like more of a holy type fear. I mean, you can have fear for your parents because they, you know, if you cross that boundary, there's going to be repercussions for it, or live outside of it.
There's fear, society described it, and fear can be a good thing. It keeps us from doing things we shouldn't do.
Yeah.
It can protect us. But my friend Brian Ball, who teaches oftentimes with our senior pastor, Pastor Jay, down in Brentwood, gave the definition that I use because I love it so much. It's ascribing power. Fear is what you ascribe power and authority to.
Mm-hmm.
So if you fear me and you ascribe power and authority to the opinions of other people, and that's what's a trap. If you ascribe power and authority to God, okay, then you hold him in healthy esteem, a high view of him. You recognize his love, his wisdom, his authority, and you take comfort in that.
Yes.
Because that is what allows you to truly believe. There are things we acknowledge are in the Bible, and there are things in there that we believe. I've lived long enough that I truly believe that God does work everything for good to those that love him, are called according to his purposes. Because I can take some of the worst things, hardest things, worst experiences in my life at the time, and I mentioned one just a few minutes ago, and see what God did. I didn't like going through some of that stuff we went through at HCA when the government was looking under every rock.
Yes.
I didn't like that. That wasn't comfortable, but what God did through that was by far better for me than if my direction hadn't changed course.
Yeah. So, and to that point, you know, it's like James 1:2-8. It's one of my staple verses, but it starts out, consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds. And a lot of people read that and they're like, well, that sucks. But you notice it says the word joy. It doesn't say happiness.
Consider it joy.
That's exactly right. Consider it pure joy. And so the trial, but think of the trial, like that trial gave you the wisdom to be able to pour into somebody else like me or whoever else to help shape their perspective on, because you're going to go through that stuff.
Yeah, and there's a why for that. Consider it pure joy, because what's it do? It
creates perseverance.
Perseverance, and then perseverance creates hope. Okay, so I can come along with somebody that's 20 years younger than me and say, yeah, I know this doesn't look good, it doesn't feel good, you think it's the worst thing in life. Here's a little bit different perspective on it, because I made it through it. It didn't kill me. It made me better. It made me more joyful. It made me have more endurance. I said here, by the end of this week, if God lets me live that long, and I believe he will, I'll be 70 years old.
Yeah.
I've told you, I've told others, I fully expect God to do more in the next 20 years of my life, in me and through me and with me, than has happened in the last 40.
Dang
The last 40, even say 50, should have been the most productive years of my life. I believe the next 20 will be the most productive, the most joy-filled, the most peaceful, and I'll have the most contentment that I've ever had.
Yeah, and so to continue on that verse, it says, if any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. But when you ask, you must believe and not doubt. And I think what people don't realize is they want more. They want to learn more. But then you go back to the beginning of the verse, because when you want more, when you want that wisdom, Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds. You're going to be faced with trials. In order to pull that out of you, you got to consider it joy. But when you're going through it, you got to fight back that doubt. Just like God told Joshua, be strong and courageous, because you will lead these people to inherit the land I swore to their ancestors to give them. He told them 3 times, be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey all the law my servant Moses gave you. Do not turn from it to the right or to the left, that you may be successful wherever you go. So when you hit that time and that doubt starts trying to work its way into you, you have to be strong and courageous to push it back and stay true and stick to that pursuit of wisdom and fight your way through that time. And that's, people say, I want patience. Well, God doesn't just give you patience like some genie. He gives you an opportunity to be patient. If you want to get stronger, physically, whatever. What you want to just get struck by a lightning bolt and, turn into Superman? No, what was that guy's name? The cartoon character, Shazam. Remember?
Yeah.
That's not how it works. You got to get your butt up and go to the gym and lift weights. My man here,
training.
Like he just said, he's about to turn 70. He's taking part in the Vanguard program. He's in there slapping young kids. I'm kidding. You're in there showing them what's up. And I mean, it's like I tell William all the time.
I'm lifting more weight than them because
you dang right you are.
I'm heavier than all of them.
That's what I'm saying. Well, I look back when I got back into this physical fitness thing, and I was weighing like 245. That was the toughest version of myself, because that was the hardest to get up and get in there, because your energy's the lowest.
Right.
You feel like crap. You have doubt. That version of myself was the toughest, most courageous part, right? But let's talk about, since we're on this real quick and we're talking about definitions, let's talk about the definition of humility. David and I were talking about this the other day, because Jay was he was talking about it at church, being humble. And I asked David, our oldest, is like, what's your definition of humility? And I think there's a misconception with humility. A lot of people think it's kind of sitting in the back, being quiet. But I told him, and I want to hear your take on this. Humility to me is simply recognizing that all the gifts, abilities you had, even where you're born, the family you were born into, none of it you had control over. You were created. You can't even boast in your own abilities. And when you break it down like that, it creates in you a knowledge and an understanding that there's no reason to judge anybody. Because your Creator made you. He loves you. You didn't build any of that. So how can you be prideful on any of it?
Yeah. Well, I love that definition. There's another one I've heard that I like as well, and I put the two together. Humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's thinking less about yourself. Mm-hmm. So when you think less of yourself, that's low self-esteem. And a lot of people would just beat up on themselves and have low self-esteem and think that's humility.
Yeah.
It's not humility at all.
I agree.
Thinking less about yourself. It's not about you. Rick Warren wrote a book called The Purpose-Driven Life.
That's right.
And I tell people, read the first sentence of it and then throw the book away, and that'll be the most useful. And the first sentence says it's not about you.
Yeah.
So that's thinking.
So let's see how does that connect? So those two connect. How do they connect?
They do connect. When we think less of ourselves and we ascribe power and authority to God, and we put our total confidence in Him, that's how we get the joy, the peace, the contentment.
Yeah.
I had people that identified a certain spiritual gift that I have.
Yeah.
And for years I didn't think I had it. For years I argued about it that I didn't have it. And then I finally realized I really realized that my friends were telling me the truth. But what I confused this spiritual gift with was I thought, well, this is just good common sense. Because you get these self-images. I'm an old country boy, dairy farmer. I just worked hard and pulled it out. So I said I had common sense.
Yeah.
And I made decisions based off my common sense. Well, other people that didn't make decisions couldn't see the same thing I saw.
Yeah.
Well, they didn't have common sense. Well, if you have common sense and the guy across the table doesn't, then guess what? Over time, you start thinking, well, I'm smart, or I'm smarter than him or her, or I've got common sense and they don't, therefore they're stupid.
Yeah.
Okay? And you have developed that attitude and project that toward them. But when you realize that what I've been calling common sense is something God gave me,
Yeah.
it's a gift, it's a spiritual gift, as you were saying,
Yep.
then what right do I have, if I'm exercising a spiritual gift God gave me, what right do I have to talk down to somebody or to think less of somebody? That's pride and arrogance.
Yeah.
Okay, and when you realize everything really is a gift, God gives us the ability to make money.
Yep.
So if you have more money or I have more money and we're doing better than somebody else, God gave us that to bless other people with, not to give us bragging rights to
Yep.
look down on other people who don't have as much.
That's right.
So anything that we have, God is the source of all of it. So we share it, we use it for the benefit of others, and that keeps us away from pride. Because if it becomes about us, that's the opposite of humility.
Yep. Yeah, and you talking about, and I love that definition of humility, of, it's thinking less of yourself. And so if you tie the two together, humility is recognizing that you were made, you were given gifts. Like, it took me a long time to realize a lot of the reasons why people call me too much, and I know I'm a lot. I'm a strong personality, or that my ideas were crazy, is because I think I could see stuff that they couldn't see down the road. It's just a gift I had. I mean, I had no control over that, right? And, that's when you recognize that that's just how you were made, and you had no control over it, it shifts you over to the ability to just say, well, let's take that and use it for good. God made me for a purpose.
That's right. And your purpose is to have that vision and cast that vision and inspire people toward it. Because some people with your same personality will say, well, why can't they see that? And just get so frustrated.
Yeah.
Why they can't see that. Well, if they could see that, they'd be wanting to cast the vision. They'd be wanting to lead the team. And then who's going to do the work?
Yeah. Well, and to that point too, man, like back in the day, I had that, but people would tell me, dude, that's stupid. I believed them because I didn't know that was my gift. I didn't know that was my purpose.
You didn't know that came from God.
I did not. And I think that's how those two connect. Mm-hmm. And so, all right, you got time for another one?
Yes, sir.
All right. Let's talk about love. The definition, we touched on this earlier. Love, to me, and I think it's been misconstrued in the world, that it's an emotion, it's how you feel about somebody else. And while I do agree that it can be a byproduct, it's a gift we got to feel, love is a commitment. Love is actually accountability, right? Love is, because...
Well, love is action. Love is
yes.
acting in the best interest of the object of who you say you love.
Yeah.
If I say I love my wife, I'm going to do what I believe is best for her. If I say I love my kids, I'm going to do what I believe is best for them, and that includes discipline.
Yeah.
The word says that...
Not just for them, but for yourself.
The word says that those that I love, I rebuke and chasten. So love is acting in the best interest of the object of that love.
Yeah.
And feelings, positive and negative, can flow with that. But in our world, love is an emotion, and we treat it as an emotion, not as an action that's in the best interest of the other person. Sometimes, like work can be frustrating.
Yeah.
It can be so fulfilling, but it can be so frustrating.
Yeah.
Thus you get the jokes about, work would be fun if it wasn't for the people, or management would be fun if it weren't for the people. But it can be very frustrating. And there are times when you just have had enough and you'd like to really mouth off because you're the boss and you can. Right. And most of those times are when you need to do the exact opposite, because the word says, say what's best for building up the other according to their needs. Yeah. Now, sometimes somebody needs to be taken down a notch, and there is a time and place for that.
Where it's righteous.
Jesus did it with Peter. He said, "Get behind me, Satan." But there are times when we feel most like digging in that we need to encourage people and lift them up.
Yeah.
Like Jesus did with Peter later.
Yeah.
I
I agree. And to that point, the discipline and like just motivation is fleeting. I categorize feelings, love, it's all fleeting. And it's not motivation that creates the good marriage, the good relationship with your kid, the good work ethic at work, the gym. It's discipline to that, to stick to your commitments and honor them. And, I always use this one. If love were an emotion, God would have wiped us off the face of this earth in his anger thousands of years ago. And he actually did one time with Noah.
That's right.
But he did save them. But that's where his discipline, his commitment, his love left us here. And, I think that is a big misconception in life. People throw around the word love way too much. I love you, man. You don't love them. You like being around them.
Yeah, you have some level of feeling for them that ranges from likability to deep affection to sometimes, in the best of circumstances, true love. I'd sacrifice for you.
Yep, absolutely. Well, big man, I'm looking forward to the years to come. I really am. 20, as you say, I say we go for 40 or 50 until the good Lord comes back. When do they say, is 120 years?
Yes,
yeah. See, you got 50. That's what I'm saying. Let's just go.
Yeah, exactly.
But, with the stuff we're offering, undeniablementality.com, we're redoing the website right now. There is one still up, but I know you're going to be involved in some of our events that are coming up later this year. We got a lot of cool things coming with the profiles. There's a white paper up right now that is getting turned into a book, and we're right now very close to creating that window that we needed to really go full bore into some of that stuff with some of our executive level people we're bringing in at AEC, and you've been instrumental in that, man. You're a blessing, and
I appreciate it.
Yeah,
it's fun being part of it.
Yeah, we'll need to have you on later on this year if you'd grace us with it, and keep rocking and rolling, brother, man. Thank you.
Thank you.